Hello friends, Hansen here, and welcome back to INT Media, a video games analysis YouTube channel. Fellas, today I come to you with some slightly illicit intelligence, but only in regards to the way in which I collected it and sort of just came about it. And before I get into it, the goal of today's video will be to give you some insight into Starfield's character creation so that you can have some sort of left of launch information to help you strategize as you're creating your character as you begin to embark on this space epic. But alas, before I do so, I must tell you the whole story regarding how this information made its way to all of us, because it is in fact quite entertaining. Let's analyze. We're about a week away from Starfield's soft launch or early access period, which begins on September 1st, 2023. And many gaming insiders or reviewers already have access to the game, and as tradition goes, a few others who have no direct ties to games coverage have managed to get their hands on a copy either by sheer luck or coincidence, or maybe by some more perhaps nefarious means, if you catch my drift here. Consequently, a few leaks have naturally sort of made their way to the forefront of the conversation surrounding Starfield's pre-launch coverage. Now, in full transparency, these leaks are nowhere near as significant or detrimental as the likes of The Last of Us Part 2's leaks, which leaked the entire story and plot of the game, or Grand Theft Auto 6's, which featured lots of gameplay elements that were released prior to Rockstar being prepared to share anything about it, or something along those lines. But nonetheless, these leaks have displayed the beginning of Starfield, and Bethesda was not okay with it. You see, fellas, this whole situation begins perhaps by irony, or pure dumb luck, as it were. Somehow, YouTube user Memphian94 managed to get his hands on a copy of Starfield, along with the Starfield Premium Edition upgrade, which gives you access to the game's DLC, which will be released in the future, and the Constellation Edition of the game, which features that baller watch that Todd Howard proudly wore in the Starfield Direct a few months back. And as a result of this, our boy Memphian94 managed to post 40 minutes featuring the beginning of Starfield. As he did this, he began to reveal quite a bit of unique information detailing the character creation system, particularly with the character backgrounds as well as many of the traits that were in the game. Once Bethesda caught wind of this, they promptly issued a copyright strike through INT Media, the parent company of Bethesda Game Studios and Bethesda Softworks, and took the video down. If you're really curious and don't really care about spoilers, you can find the footage out there somewhere online. I'm not going to link to it in the description of this video or anything like that, but if you search it out there on the internet, I'm sure you can stumble across it if you try hard enough. Following this unfortunate incident for our boy Memphian, he posted a series of YouTube shorts in which he talks about Starfield in a little bit of detail. He said the following directly to his phone camera while taking a solid toke of whatever device he happens to be smoking in this video, and says the following.
I ain't mad. Know what happens. For real. That game smooth. For all the gamers out there who want a different type of game, that's definitely something to get. It takes time. You're gonna have to read it. Can't just jump into it. You're gonna be just jumping around how I was for a minute. Todd, no offense, man. That's a good game.
And with this revolutionary quote, Memphian94, our dear friend, is now officially the first person to ever review Starfield. I reached out to Memphian94 for comment regarding how he managed to get his lucky paws on a copy of the game so early, but he never got back to me. Perhaps he's too much of a legend for such a thing. Hello friends, it's me Hansen here from the editing room. In fact, I have an interesting update regarding our boy Memphian94. Apparently fellas, this gets a little crazy. He was booked on felony charges after, so this gets interesting, right? Because apparently the way that he got a hold of the game and the Constellation Edition and the deluxe upgrade or whatever is he stole all of the copies of the game. He stole several copies of the game. So I have reporting here from Kotaku. They actually did real journalism. Can you believe that? But it says here the following quote: The saga of a now infamous Starfield leaker has ended up with a 29-year-old man booked on a felony charge after allegedly trying to sell stolen copies of the game online prior to its September 1st release date. The information on the Shelby County Sheriff's Office lists a felony charge for $2,500 to $10,000 worth of stolen property, a misdemeanor charge for $1,000 or less of stolen property, and a misdemeanor charge for possession of marijuana. So, fellas, it is as they say, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. But that's not all, folks. There's a couple more pieces of information to get through here, and this information was routed to me via a small-time leaker / games enthusiast known as Visceral on Twitter, or X if you're so inclined. Visceral posted several screenshots which display more details from character creation, including information regarding more of the character backgrounds. And this is where our analysis begins today, fellas. Now, I'm not going to show you any of that gameplay or any of the screenshots from that gameplay. I, like all of you out there, am super pumped for Starfield, and I want my first experience with the game to be as untainted and spoiler-free as possible. But there's an umbrella of information that came from the leaks that I'd like to talk about today, as I feel like it could be helpful, and personally, I don't really view it as spoilerish. I'm going to be going through all of the known character backgrounds and traits from Starfield, and my goal of doing this is to help you better understand what sort of character you want to make when Starfield releases at the beginning of September, here in just over a week. With role-playing games that demand that you create a build for your character, I always find it very helpful to know as much non-spoiler content as possible that can be used to create the sort of character build that I would want to play as. I feel this goes a long way to help create the sort of gameplay experience that we all want from these games. Before Fallout 4 released in 2015, which, by the way, can you believe it's been that freaking long since we've gotten a game from Bethesda Game Studios? It's crazy, man. But anyways, back in 2015, Bethesda Game Studios decided to be a complete bro to a 17-year-old Hansen and the rest of us RPG nerds out there by unveiling the entire character creation system for Fallout 4 before the game came out. I personally loved this. It gave me the opportunity to map out the sort of character I wanted to make before I even had my hands on the game. And with this information, I hope to do the same for all of you out there, as it can be helpful when beginning a gargantuan RPG like Starfield seems to be. Plus, I've always been kind of nichely obsessed with builds in RPGs, so I'm excited to get into it. But anyways, back to the subject matter at hand, and by the way, if you don't want to know this stuff, no harm, no foul, man. Just know that potential spoilers for the game's character creation system may lie ahead of you, but I don't know, you're going to see this in the first 15 minutes of gameplay anyways, so it's like whatever, right? So a lot of this information has already been unveiled in the demos and press events for Starfield that have already taken place, but I'd like to take the time to compile all this information in addition with the leaks that we recently have received in one place for your convenience. So know that the game gives you the option of choosing one of 20 character backgrounds and 3 of 17 traits as you begin to create your character. So I'll begin with the character backgrounds, and they are as follows. First is Beast Hunter, and the description is as follows. From the Ashta of Aquila to the terramorphs that plague the whole of the settled systems, hostile alien life abounds. You've learned the skills to track them, find them, and take them down. The Beast Hunter starting skills are Fitness, which has to do with player health, Ballistics, which has to do with the amount of damage that you do with ballistic weapons, and Gastronomy, which allows the player to craft food and drink items and research additional recipes. The next character background is Bouncer, and the description is as follows. You've worked the line at the toughest clubs in the settled systems. Back then, you learned that most non-lethal confrontations can be solved one of 2 ways, a strong right hook or a more strongly secured door. The Bouncer's starting skills are as follows. First is Boxing, which has to do with the amount of damage that you do with unarmed weapons, Security, which has to do with the security minigame that you can use to get through locked doors, and Fitness, which again has to do with player health. The next character background is Bounty Hunter, and I have to say, fellas, this might be the one I'm leaning towards, as it has some interesting starting skills and kind of gives me a little Boba Fett vibe, if you catch my drift. The description for the Bounty Hunter is as follows. Wherever there are wanted individuals, there are those who profit from their capture, and your quarry knows that in the vastness of space they can run, but they can't hide. The bounty hunter starting skills include piloting, which has to do apparently with the maneuverability of your spaceship, targeting control systems, which has to do with the way in which your spaceship can lock on to enemy spaceships and, take them down. And finally, boost pack training, which this is probably the game mechanic that I am the most excited for in Starfield, just being able to use the boost pack and jetpack around at different levels of gravity in my, open world Bethesda space RPG sounds like everything I ever wanted. Next, we have the Chef, and I gotta say, I'm a big fan of the Chef. Whenever I go back to do a melee playthrough, I'm probably gonna roll with the Chef. The character background story is as follows. While the unrefined masses scarfed down chunks by the shipload, you catered to those with a more discerning palate. In your kitchen, countless alien species became true culinary masterpieces. The chef comes slicing out of the kitchen with the starting skills of gastronomy, which again has to do with player recipes, food, drink creation, things of that nature. Dueling, which is a new one. This has to do with the amount of damage that you do with melee weapons such as knives and blades and shit like that. And finally, scavenging, which has to do with the amount of loot that you can find on your enemies and in containers and things of that nature. Think of the Scoundrel perk from Fallout 4, which allowed you to find more ammunition in containers. So something similar to that, I'm thinking. The next character background is Combat Medic, and I gotta say this one sounds cool and kind of warms my heart a little bit. Let me read the background story to you. Leave it to human beings to fight over something as infinite as outer space. That's where you come in. You've never been afraid to take on the enemy, but you'd much rather take care of your friends. Yeah, I know, right? Pulling on your heartstrings a little bit, huh? The Combat Medic starts with the skills of Pistol Certification, which increases the damage that you do with pistols and handguns. The Medicine skill, which increases the amount of healing that you can do with certain healing items. And finally, the Wellness skill. And I gotta say here, fellas, I might need to issue a little bit of a correction because Wellness and Fitness could be interchangeable here. One of these perks could have to do with your amount of stamina, which is also known as O2 in Starfield, like your oxygen levels or whatever. So this could be interchangeable, like Wellness could be for player health. I'm not really sure. Or, Fitness could be for stamina or something. So time will tell. We don't have all the information in front of us right now. We will once the game releases, but if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Next we have the Cyber Runner. From Neon to New Atlantis, the megacorps stand as monuments to power, prestige, and profit. You've worked both for and against them on the inside and out, often sacrificing conscience for credits. The Cyber Runner will be running with the stealth skills, which, if you've played typical Bethesda Game Studios games, you know that you can, sneak around. You can do the stealth archer build in Skyrim. You can do the stealth sniper build in Fallout 4, Fallout 3, stuff like that. So this is your traditional stealth skill in these kind of games. Security, as we mentioned before, is going to have to do with your ability to get through locked doors and locks that are using the security minigame. And finally, theft, which has to do with your ability to steal things and pickpocket things from people. Next, we have the Cyberneticist. Robots? Mere toys. Neuroamps? Good for parlor tricks. The Colony War may have made implants and upgrades available to veterans, but you once saw a greater future. Humans and machines as one. The Cyberneticist will be rocking the starting skills of Medicine, which, as we said earlier, has to do with the amount of healing that you get from healing items. Security, we've been over that. And Lasers, new skill here. And the Laser skill is going to allow you to do more damage with the laser weapons. Next, we have a classic, the Diplomat. The wars are over. Peace now reigns in the settled systems, but only because there are those quietly fighting to keep it. Because of you, agreements were signed, words were heeded. lives were spared. The Diplomat comes rocking the starting skills of the Silver-Tongued Devil, such as Persuasion, which is going to enhance your ability to succeed in the Persuasion minigame, a new mechanic that's being introduced in Starfield. The Diplomat also comes with the Commerce skill, which I'm reading here, and it sounds interesting. It says rank 1 of this perk, or rather rank 1 of this skill. We're not dealing with Fallout here, Hans, and you fucking... It says you are able to purchase tier 2 businesses and access rare items from your trading outposts. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, again, we have the Wellness perk, which again has to do with either your health or your ability to have more stamina or oxygen in Starfield. Next, we have the Explorer character background, and this looks to be sort of the vanilla option for the game. Like, I think this is kind of the default, what it kind of sets you to. I'm not sure, though. It seems kind of vanilla for the type of game that Starfield is. But the Explorer character background is as follows. They said exploration is a lost art. You didn't listen, as the major factions argued over the space they desperately tried to control. You were busy uncovering the wonders of the settled systems. The Explorer comes with the starting skills of lasers, which, as we said earlier, increases damage with laser weapons. Astrodynamics, oh boy, a new one, which allows, as you make grav jumps, it consumes less fuel the more you upgrade this skill. And finally, the Surveying skill, which allows you to be able to scan rare environment traits. I don't know what that means. Next, we have the Gangster, which is one of the new ones that came out from these leaks. And the backstory is as follows. You were always disgusted by suckers killing themselves to make an honest wage, so as soon as you were old enough to hold a weapon, you took what you wanted from anyone unlucky enough to have it. The Gangster starts out with the following starting skills. Shotgun certification, which increases damage with shotguns, as I'm sure you can tell. Boxing, which we talked about earlier, with the Bouncer character background, which increases damage with unarmed weapons. And finally, Theft, which increases your ability to steal things from people. So yeah, it looks to give you this kind of a character background of you being a complete asshole and doing whatever you want to people, I guess. The next character background is known as the Homesteader. This kind of looks to be some sort of planet customization, planet simulator, planet builder kind of. This is the class you would choose if that's what you want to do. But the character background description is as follows. The discovery of the settled system's many oxygen-rich planets and moons meant humans could live just about anywhere. If they had the know-how, you did, and utilized it to great effect. The Homesteader background skills, the starting skills, are as follows. You begin with Geology, which is a new skill that we have not been over yet. This skill has everything to do with likely the way in which you collect rocks and resources as you use the mining laser in the game. So the Geology skill likely helps with the scanning and the resulting yields of those resource nodes when you mine them. So that's kind of what I'm thinking this skill means. Again, we don't have 100% confirmation regarding how this skill works. The next skill is the Surveying skill, which has to do with scanning systems, planets, creatures, or resources on the surface of those planets. And the Surveying skill is likely going to provide a boost or some sort of additive effect to those efforts. Finally, the Homesteader has the Weightlifting skill. And this, traditionally, as I would assume, has to do with the amount of items that you can carry in your inventory. Think of the Strong Back perk from the Fallout game, something along those lines. So yeah, Homesteader up front looks like the type of background you would pick if you want to roleplay as a Homesteader, or if you are looking to really get into Starfield's planet customization, your ability to create settlements and outposts and things like that. If you're looking to do that in the game, this is probably the character background that you are wanting to go with. Next, we have the Industrialist character background, and the character background description is as follows. There was a time when all you wanted to do was be a titan of industry, maybe a ship designer or megacorp exec. Thankfully, that skill set never goes out of style in the settled systems. The Industrialist comes wielding the iron fist of capitalism with the following starting skills. Security, which we've been over before, but again has to do with the way in which you access the game's lock-picking sort of minigame. Persuasion, which again we've been over, but that has to do with your ability to convince and persuade people. And finally, research methods, which is a new skill. The research methods skill reduces the resources required to craft items and complete research projects by 10%, which is a little interesting here. It gives you the ability to use less resources to make stuff, which is obviously very helpful. So again, if you are looking to be some sort of hyper-capitalistic overlord within the settled systems, the Industrialist is what you're going to want to go with. Next, we have the long hauler background, and this looks to be sort of the, if you want to pilot stuff, if you want to, I don't know, you're like a trucker almost, I guess. But the background description is as follows. Let those other hothead pilots obsess over laser weapons and maneuverability. You are a space trucker, pure and simple. Pack the cargo, get it there fast, get paid, repeat. Life is simple and good. The starting skills for the old long hauler background are weightlifting, piloting, and ballistic weapon systems. So not too much to say there. We've kind of already been over a lot of this. Ballistic weapon systems looks to be something along the lines of how your weapon systems on your spacecraft are utilized in combat. So it looks like it gives a damage buff to those particular weapons. I do like the idea of being a some sort of space trucker in Starfield. I love that the game gives you that option, lets you live out your fantasy of being some sort of trucker in space, and I enjoy the phrase that Bethesda has written here when it says life is simple and good when you are a space trucker. I do enjoy that philosophy. Next, we have the Pilgrim, Wayfarer, Wanderer, Seeker, Transient. You've been called many things during your travels and learned something those others could never understand. The journey is the destination. The Pilgrim comes in wielding good vibes of the starting skills of gastronomy, scavenging, and surveying. So gastronomy obviously has to do with the amount of healing that you receive from food-related items, as well as the way in which you can craft food and drink. Scavenging, as we went over before, similar to the scavenger perk from Fallout 4, where you can get more items from containers and from dead bodies and things like that. And finally, surveying, I should say, has to do with the way in which you can survey planets and see what is going on those planets, as well as enemies and things of that nature. So the Pilgrim, yeah man, gives me the far out vibes, kind of that if you want to explore a lot and stuff like that, I guess. I don't know, this looks to be a little boring. I wish they did a little more with the Pilgrim background, in my opinion. I wish it could have been more of a religious tied background, but alas, I guess if you want to be some sort of neophyte of the Serpent's Embrace or something like that within Starfield, I guess you can pick the Pilgrim, but whatever. Next, we have the Professor background. You've always enjoyed learning, but nothing could compare to the joy of teaching others. As humankind spread throughout the stars, there was never a lack of knowledge to obtain, and you gladly assisted. The Professor comes in teaching the good word of the following starting skills: astrodynamics, geology, and research methods. Astrodynamics appears to help you get more mileage from your grav drive, which is pretty cool. Geology, which we've discussed, kind of helps with the way in which you can get resources as you mine rocks with your mining laser. And research methods, as we mentioned earlier, reduces the resources required to craft items and complete research projects. So yes, the Professor, what I will say is that I do appreciate the amount of effort it seems that Bethesda Game Studios has gone to include these character backgrounds that may or may not be necessarily combative in nature, but rather that seem to be people that just kind of live in the settled systems and that are going about their lives and suddenly stumble upon the artifacts and the main quest and things like that. So I do appreciate the lengths that they went to seem to incorporate that into the character creation system. I think it's cool. Next is the Ronin, and I gotta say the Ronin sounds pretty dope if you want to be some sort of stealth assassin, some sort of stealth swordsman. But the description is as follows: masterless and unbound, you wandered the settled systems, as a blade for hire. To some, you were a simple mercenary, to others, a hero, and to a select few, a nightmare that they can never wake from. The Ronin comes slicing Achilles tendons out of the shadows with the following starting skills. Dueling, which is going to increase your damage with melee weapons naturally, much like the chef we mentioned earlier. Stealth, which has to do with your ability to be stealthy in the game. You typically in these Bethesda Studios games, when you crouch, that activates the stealth system, and then you can sneak around and get extra damage by getting sneak attack critical hits. And finally, the scavenging skill, which we went over, and this has to do with your ability to find loot and things like that. So the Ronin, super awesome, sounds cool. All about this. I'm curious to see. So in Fallout 4, they introduced a new skill called Blitz. If you know what I'm familiar with, this made a melee kind of stealth character very viable in the game, as you could get sneak attack criticals from super far away in Fallout 4. So I wonder if they're going to add something sort of like that here in Starfield, but it doesn't seem like there's some sort of VATS system in Starfield, so I guess we will wait and see. But yes, the Ronin sounds awesome. I imagine this will have super cool dialogue options, which would be interesting to see. Next, we have the Sculptor. Now, the Sculptor, another one of these seemingly innocent starting points for your character in Starfield, but the character background description is as follows. With your knowledge of anatomy and skilled, steady hands, you could have become a surgeon. Instead, you followed your heart and created works of art that amaze and inspire. So the Sculptor comes wielding the character background starting skills of medicine, geology, and persuasion, all of which we've been over before. Next, we have the Soldier background, and look, this looks to be kind of generic, but admittedly one that I feel like lots of people that just kind of boot up Starfield and want to jump in, this is the character background that they are going to pick. But the character background description is as follows. The settled systems is no stranger to warfare, and if there's one thing armed conflict relies on, it's trained warriors with guns and guts. You had both. Simple, bloody work, and you were great at it. The Soldier comes soldiering on with the starting skills of fitness, ballistics, and boost pack training. So fitness probably has to do with the way in which your character loses stamina or O2 as they are sprinting in the game. Ballistics has to do with your damage with ballistic weapons, pretty simple there. And then boost pack training has to do with the effectiveness of your boost pack, otherwise known as your jetpack in Starfield. So we'll say Soldier is simple and it looks pretty enticing, especially for the starting skills that you come with. If you just want to jump in, fly around, and shoot stuff in the game, this looks like the background that you would want to pick, honestly. Next, fellas, we have a very interesting character background in the Space Scoundrel. Now, the Space Scoundrel kind of gives me Han Solo-ish vibes. And I gotta say, I know I was talking a lot about the Bounty Hunter character background earlier, saying that that's the one that I want to pick, but I might have to make an audible and say that this is the one I want to go with, because this sounds exactly what I would like to do, apart from the fact that there is no boost pack training, which is kind of a huge bummer for me, as I will be boost packing everywhere in the game. But nonetheless, let's go over the starting skills. The Space Scoundrel comes conniving their way in with the Pistol Certification starting skill, which is a combat skill, has to do with the amount of damage that pistols do in the game. The Piloting skill, which generally has to do with the maneuverability of your spacecraft as you're flying through outer space. And Persuasion, which has to do with the ability in which you can navigate the Persuasion minigame in Starfield. Now, these seem to be very interesting starting skills, very useful starting skills, the way in which I would want to play the game. The only thing I'm missing here personally is the booster pack training skill, which, we shall see which one I end up going with, but gotta say, the Pistol Certification, Piloting, Persuasion, very enticing, as well as the description, where it kind of makes it a more morally ambiguous sort of background, which I do appreciate. And finally, fellas, just like that, we are at our final official character background with the Xenobiologist. And I gotta say, this one sounds cool, but let me get into the background description. The settled systems is home to untold alien species, and while none of them have yet proven sentient, that never deterred you. So you sought out and studied them for whatever gifts they offered. The starting skills for the Xenobiologist are lasers, which has to do with the damage that laser weapons do, surveying, which has to do again with the ability to scan planets and enemies and things like that for the sort of information that you might need as you're going into a fight, and finally fitness, which has to do with the amount of O2 or stamina that you're going to lose from sprinting in the game. Xenobiologist sounds interesting, especially if Starfield has aliens, which is, the jury's still out on that one as it hasn't really been discussed yet, but nonetheless, gotta say, sounds cool. And finally, fellas, this brings us to a last option that you could pick. This is the so-called file not found option within the character creation system, and the description is as follows. Oddly, there's no information on file about your past life, clerical oversight, deletion by some powerful unknown faction, or was there something just not out of note to mention? Whatever the reason, your past is known only to you. What's important is the here and now and the path you're about to forge. The starting skills for the file not found character background option are as follows. The wellness skill, which increases character health, ballistics, which allows you to do more damage with ballistic weapons, and finally the piloting skill, which has to do with the maneuverability and the ability to fly spacecraft and your spaceship. And yes, fellas, that brings us to the end of the character backgrounds. Lots of interesting options here. I gotta give a couple of really cool shout outs. I gotta say, I love, as I mentioned previously, I love that Bethesda is going out of their way to include a lot of character backgrounds that may be more passive in nature, with the Sculptor, the Professor, the Pilgrim, the Long Hauler, things like that. Seemingly just kind of normal characters that are brought into extraordinary circumstances in the plot of Starfield. But I also am enticed by the more exciting options, like the Space Scoundrel, the Bounty Hunter, the Soldier, things like that. And then I also love the file not found option. It looks like they're trying to give the players just this ability to just kind of have a blank slate and go in with these skills that pretty much you would need to have if you're going to play the game without any sort of role-playing in mind. But nonetheless, I do think it's important to pay attention to the file not found skills, as it seems to me that this is what Bethesda is like, well, if you don't really want to go with a background, here's the skills you're going to need. You're going to need health, you're going to need ballistic weapon damage, you're going to need piloting. So that indicates to me that we're going to be flying spacecraft around a lot more than we might expect in the game. So I'm excited nonetheless to jump in, but that is all the character background. So now you have everything you need to know in order to pick a background. And if I had to say what I was going to pick right now, I'm going with Space Scoundrel. And the second I level up, I'm going to start investing in the boost pack training skill. But we shall see. Anyways, let's move on to the character traits. Now remember that you can select up to 3 of these traits to give to your character, and these are entirely optional. So you can give your character 3, or you can give your character none. It's totally up to you. And additionally, these all come with their pros and cons. So they'll give you like a little benefit, and they'll also make you less powerful in some way. So we'll get into that as I go through each of them in perpetuity. Okay, first we have the alien DNA trait, and the description is this. You volunteered for a controversial experiment that combines alien and human DNA. As a result, you start with a higher health pool and greater endurance, but healing items aren't as effective. So the advantage here is you have a high health pool, obviously, and you also have high endurance, but the disadvantage is that med packs will heal you less. So unfortunate, right? But that's the trade-off. This might be useful for some sort of a melee character, something along those lines, but maybe you don't want to run this all the time, especially if you're maybe a more squishy character. The next trait is the Dream Home trait, which I actually might take, because if I'm rolling a bounty hunter, it might be kind of fun to have like my own little palace off somewhere or something. But the description is this. You own a luxurious, customizable house on a peaceful planet. Unfortunately, it comes with a 125,000 credit mortgage with Gal Bank that has to be paid weekly. So the advantage obviously is that you have a free starting outpost. That sounds kind of nice. And the disadvantage is that you have to pay a weekly fee until you totally pay off your debt. So yeah, we're still in debt even in fucking Starfield. Next we have the Empath Trait. And this says that you are deeply connected to the feelings of others. Performing actions your companion likes will result in a temporary increase in combat effectiveness, but performing actions they don't like will have the precise opposite effect. So yeah, kind of a little interesting trait you can pick up here. You can get stronger in combat, and probably gain a better reputation with your companions when you do what they want. But you have that trade-off when they don't approve of kind of what you're doing. So yeah, interesting. Next is the Extrovert Trait, and it says that you are a people person. Exerting yourself uses less oxygen when adventuring with human companions, but more when you're adventuring alone. And then furthermore, you cannot combine this trait with the Introvert Trait. So the advantage is you use less oxygen when you're traveling with companions, and the disadvantage is that you use more oxygen when traveling alone. So yeah, it a little bit of an offset there. Next we have the Freestar Collective Settler Trait, which is our first faction allegiance trait. So this is a little interesting. And it says that you gain access to special Freestar Collective dialogue options and better rewards from some missions given by that faction, but crime bounty towards other factions is greatly increased, and you also cannot combine this with any other faction allegiance trait. So the advantage, right, you get the additional Freestar Collective dialogue options, which might be cool if you want to roleplay as like the space cowboy kind of character. And then you also get better rewards in Freestar Collective missions. The disadvantage here is, you get crime bounties towards other factions is greatly increased. It disables, and then you give up the other faction allegiance traits, like the Neon Street Rat and United Colonies Native, whatever. We'll go over those later, but you give those up in taking this. Next we have All Reliable, the Hero Worshipped Trait, which you will be very familiar with this if you played Oblivion, where you have the adoring fan. And the description is that you have the adoring fan who will show up randomly and jabber at you incessantly, but on the plus side, he will join your ship's crew and give you gifts. So, sounds cool. Yeah, so you get another member of your crew, but he's annoying and whatever. Definitely think I will take this one because it'll be funny. Next, we have the Introvert Trait, which is the complete opposite of the Extrovert Trait. So you use less oxygen when you're traveling alone, but when you're with companions, you use more oxygen, I guess. So yeah, it lowers your endurance effectively. Next we have the Kid Stuff Trait, where you have parents in Starfield, and your parents are alive and well and you can visit them in their home, but the downside of this is that you automatically have to send 2% of your credits home to them every week. So a bit of a bummer there, but yeah, so you can have your parents in case your parents hate you in real life or something. Next we have the Neon Street Rat Trait, which is another faction allegiance trait, and the description is this: you grew up on the mean streets of Neon. You gain access to special dialogue options and better rewards from some missions on Neon. Crime bounties by other factions are greatly increased. So yeah, you get some cool Neon dialogue options, you get better rewards on Neon. But same thing with the Freestar Collective Settler Trait that we mentioned earlier. So yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer there. You get some trade-offs. Next we have the Raised Enlightened Trait, which is our first religion trait. So it says you grow up as a member of the Enlightened, and you gain access to a special chest full of items in the House of the Enlightened in New Atlantis, but you lose access to the Sanctum Universum chest. So you can't combine these with any other religion trait. So you get special equipment and additional dialogue options, but you're losing out on the Raised Universal Traits and the Serpent's Embrace traits. We'll get to that in a second. Next, as we just said, we have the Raised Universal Trait. So it says you grew up as a member of the Sanctum Universum, and you gain access to a special chest full of items in the Sanctum Universum in New Atlantis, but you lose access to the House of the Enlightened chest. So yeah. And then finally, we have the Serpent's Embraced Trait, which sounds a little interesting. It sounds a little sinister, but this is what it says. You grew up worshipping the Great Serpent. grav jumping provides you a temporary boost to health and endurance, but health and endurance are lowered if you don't continue jumping regularly, like an addiction. So yeah, this one's kind of sounds cool. If you like to jump a lot, I might actually take this one so you can get the a lot of jumping or something, you know, because I'm planning on boost packing everywhere as I mentioned. So yeah, it sounds cool. Next, we have the Spaced Trait, and this says that your body has become acclimated to space. Health and endurance are increased when in space, but decreased when on the surface. And then on the flip side, we have the Terra Firma trait, which says you've never acclimated to space. Haha, your health and oxygen are increased when on the surface, but they're decreased when you're in space. So yeah, those are another pair of inverse opposites. You can't take one if you take one of the other, so you have to keep that in mind. And next we have the Taskmaster Trait. This one sounds a little interesting. I'm kind of curious to see how this is going to play out in gameplay, but it says, occasionally, if you have a crew trained in a certain ship system, that system will automatically repair itself to full health whenever it is damaged below 50%. However, all crew cost twice as much to hire, so I don't know if this one will be worth it, but it sounds kind of interesting. We'll have to see how the Starfighter system kind of plays out. And then we have the United Colonies native trait. This is another one of the faction allegiance traits, so you get United Colonies dialogue options, better rewards, stuff like that. Same as the Freestar Collective Neon Street Rat, but you cannot take those other two traits. And then finally, this seems to be like the best one and the most obvious one that you would want to take, but it says that it's the Wanted trait. So the description is that someone put a price on your head and word has spread. Occasionally, armed mercenaries will show up and try to kill you, but being cornered gives you an edge. When your health is low, you do extra damage. So yeah, pretty good advantage, right? You do increased damage at low health, so it could save your life and prevent you from having to reload your last save, right? But I guess the downside is like bounty hunters will randomly show up, and I don't know how powerful they are, so I don't know if like what the downside is here. But I'm definitely gonna take this one. This one sounds really cool. And with that, fellas, that is all of the character backgrounds and all of the traits that will be in Starfield. So now you have somewhat of a better idea of how you could potentially approach creating your character in Starfield. So I also, last thing before I go, I would like to draw your attention to this like giant Word document I found online that details all of the skills that are going to be in Starfield. It sounds really interesting, so I will provide a link to that in the description. It breaks out every individual skill based off of everything that we know. It also provides like a fair bit of speculation into the skills that we don't know anything about. But yeah, so if you're curious and reading more about the skills, if you kind of want to plan ahead and see how you want to design your build, yeah, totally go for it. I'm going to put that in the description. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I have for you today. We are very close indeed, my friends. As I'm recording this video, it is August 23rd, 2023, which means, what is that? Let me pull up the old calendar here. Yeah, so we are like, oh man, a week and 2 days away from early access, and then we are officially 2 weeks away from the launch of the game. So yeah, we are getting down to the wire, my friends, and I can't wait. I am pumped to jump in with all of you, and hopefully this gives you a little bit of perspective as you begin to think through your character build. So that's all I got, friends. That is it. So this is Hansen with INT Media out.